Good morning, everyone. My name is John Payne. I am the Deputy Superintendent of Education for our Division of Federal Programs and Accountability. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping reminders, please. To reduce distraction during our presentation, we ask that you mute your computer and phones during the presentation, turn your camera functions off, and most especially, if you have questions during the presentation, if you will put those questions in the chat box, following the session, we will review those questions. If we need to respond to you individually, we can. If not, if they're questions that multiple people have, we will add that information to our frequently asked questions documents and send that information out. We do want to remind you that this session is being recorded and you will be able to access it at a later date. Again, welcome to the Office of Federal and State Accountability's 2021 ESSA Academy for our final day together. We appreciate you taking your time to join us in this professional development opportunity. And more importantly, we thank you for the tremendous work that you have done over the past year as we have experienced this worldwide pandemic, and you have continued without fail to serve our students and faculty across South Carolina. So for all of your work, thank you for what you do and what you continue to do, especially with our federal programs. This morning, our session with you is going to be on the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, or ESSER, funds program. Again, I'm John Payne, Deputy Superintendent at the South Carolina Department of Education. Joining me this morning will be our two ESSER program coordinators, Ms. Caroline Hines and Mr. John Massengill, who will be going through with you a number of things about our various ESSER programs, where we are now, and some important information about these two programs, or about our ESSER programs. So we do want to give a disclaimer that this presentation is designed to help you understand federal and state requirements and procedures for the ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and what soon will be, and we'll talk about this later on in our presentation, the ESSER 3 subgrant programs. If you are a fan of Star Wars, this may begin to have a kind of trilogy ring to you. We got ESSER 1 back in the spring, A New Hope. We've got ESSER 2 back in January. That was kind of the ESSER Strikes Back. And ESSER 3 that we'll get here in the coming months will be the return of ESSER. So we will have ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 subgrants. But this presentation is not a substitute for reading the ESSER grant subgrant awards, all the program-specific assurances, as well as the department's assurances and terms and conditions for federal subawards, and the applicable federal regulations for this sub-award. So why are we here today? What is our purpose? The purpose of our session with you this morning is to provide an overview of the elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds programs, which include ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and soon to be ESSER 3, as provided under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, which was passed last spring, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or CRSA, that was passed back in December, and lastly, the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA Act, that was signed last month. So thank you again for your time this morning, and thank you for questions that you may pose in advance. Again, if you have questions, please do add those to the chat. We will review those and respond back as quickly as we can. So with that being said, thank you again for your attendance, and now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Caroline Hines, who is one of our ESSER program coordinators, to take you through the CARES Act and ESSER 1. Ms. Hines?
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Hines. I'm one of the other ESSER program coordinators here, and I'm going to be speaking about the CARES Act funds, also known to us as ESSER 1. So many of us here are relatively familiar with CARES funds now that we're roughly a year into the COVID-19 pandemic. On March 27, 2020, Congress passed the Coronavirus Relief and Economic Security Act. The U.S. Department of Education was authorized to provide about $30 billion to ESSER 1 fund to SEAs across the nation. The U.S. Department of Ed awarded these funds to state educational agencies to subgrant to public school districts to address the impact of COVID-19 on elementary and secondary schools. ESSER 1 is the first grant authorized by 3 relief bills signed into law in the last year. The ESSER 1 program is authorized by the CARES Act. There are 12 expenditure categories of allowable activities. And an important note to make here is that all ESSER 1 funds must be expended by September 30th, 2022, and there is an equitable services requirement under ESSER 1. The South Carolina Department of Education received a total of $216 million from ESSER 1. District allocations were made based on the Title I Part A methodology from fiscal year 2019, and the SCDE has reserved 10% or roughly $21 million of the total allocation for state-level activities, including administrative costs. So now we'll be going into some of more detail on those 12 buckets of allowable uses of ESSER 1 funds. First up, we have Category 1. This is any activity under ESSA, including IDEA, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, Perkins Act, Subtitle B of McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Second, we have this is a bucket for any funds needed to respond to and prepare for the coronavirus. Under the third bucket, funds can be expended to support school leaders and specific needs of individual schools. In the fourth bucket, funds can be expended to address the needs of vulnerable student populations. And the fifth bucket allows for funds to be expended to ensure preparedness and coordination to respond to the coronavirus. For example, if your district needs funds for a COVID leave policy, this would be an appropriate categorization of that expense. Okay, next we have the sixth bucket, where funds can be appropriated into this category to train staff and faculty on matters related to the spread of infectious diseases. The seventh bucket addresses cleaning supplies needed to sanitize classrooms and school facilities and any PPE purchases. The eighth bucket allows for funds to be expended for the planning and coordination of continued education during long-term closures related to COVID. The ninth bucket allows for purchases of educational technology like laptops, Wi-Fi, learning management systems to be used by teachers and students. The 10th bucket allows for funds to be used for supporting students' mental health. The 11th bucket allows for funds to be used for summer learning like summer camps and the associated costs that come with running those summer camps. And the 12th bucket allows for expenditures that may not fall under any of the previous 11 categories, but can help address any costs associated with COVID that will ensure the continuity of educational services and employment. Okay, all of the LEAs in South Carolina have now submitted and been approved for an ESSER 1 subgrant by submitting an application and spending plan this past summer. Now that the ESSER program has been underway for several months, the ESSER team has conducted monitoring remotely using a tiered system. Quarterly reports are also required to be submitted if funds have been expended during a quarter. These reports are due on the 5th day following the close of each calendar quarter. The link to this report can be found at the end of our presentation today, and it's also found on our ESSER webpage. The SCDE is also obligated to fulfill reporting requirements by the U.S. Department of Education. Many of you may recall a survey sent out to all districts earlier this year to be filled out. This data was used to fulfill reporting requirements, and this expenditure data can be viewed through the Education Stabilization Fund's website linked here on this slide. To conclude our ESSER 1 portion of the presentation, I have a progress report for you all. To date, over $91 million of ESSER 1 has been expended by our districts. This is about 47% of the total allocation. 11 districts have spent 90% or more of ESSER 1 to date, and 5 districts have received compliance monitoring. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John Massengill, who is going to present on ESSER 2. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody, and we're going to move on to an overview of SRSA and ESSER 2. So, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act was signed into law on December 27, 2020. This act provided an additional $54.3 billion as the ESSER 2 grant. Like ESSER 1, the SEAs have been awarded grants to provide LEAs with emergency funds to address the impact of COVID-19. And some more specific information about ESSER 2. As already stated, ESSER 2 was authorized by the SRSA Act. All 12 original allowable categories are allowable under ESSER 2 with the addition of 3 new categories that we will go into a little later in the presentation. ESSER 2 funds must be expended by September 30th, 2023, and LEAs do not have an equitable services obligation under ESSER 2, which will be provided at the state level through the EANS program. And the ESSER 2 allocation, South Carolina was awarded $940 million in ESSER 2 funds, $846 million of which will flow through to districts based on Title I, Part A from summer 2020. The SCDE will reserve $94 million for state-level activities, and as mentioned, ESSER 2 expires on September 30th, 2023. Now we'll take a look at the new allowable categories under ESSER 2. Category 12 is intended to address learning loss while paying special attention to the unique needs of students. This includes administering high-quality assessments to accurately determine students' academic progress and needs, implementing evidence-based activities to meet the needs of students, providing assistance to parents and families with distance learning, and tracking student attendance and engagement with distance learning. Category 13 is for school facility repairs and improvements to enable operation and reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure. Category 14 is for inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve the indoor air quality in school facilities. For both Category 13 and 14, the SCDE Office of School Facilities will be involved with approval. To expedite approval, please provide greater detail for these 2 categories. OSF will determine the level of alteration being proposed and will provide conditional approvals for Level 2 and Level 3 alteration requests. And then here listed are some special considerations for budgeting funds in these categories. Please be able to clearly link the proposed activity to the pandemic. Costs must be reasonable, allowable, and necessary, which could mean more detailed documentation could be required for new construction proposals. All Davis-Bacon rules apply. Full OSF approval is required to claim funds in these categories. And as always, please make sure you are following all applicable EDGAR requirements. And here is a little context about the different levels of alteration. A Level 1 alteration is the removal and replacement of the covering of existing materials using new materials that serve the same purpose. Some examples of this level would include replacing carpeting, painting, or other routine maintenance projects. A Level 2 alteration is the reconfiguration or extension of any space or system, addition or elimination of any door or window, or the installation of any additional equipment. Projects like HVAC replacement and classroom expansion would fall under this level. And a level 3 alteration is a level 1 or 2 alteration where the work area exceeds 50% of the building area, which would include any new construction proposal. And here is the process flow for OSF approval for Category 13 and 14. Once ESSER staff forwards plans to OSF for review, they will first establish if sufficient information is present to make a determination. OSF will then determine if the proposal is routine or non-routine maintenance. In the case of routine maintenance, ESSER staff will notify the district and send out the GAN. Non-routine maintenance will receive a conditional approval pending an OSF permit for full approval. Please note, districts should not claim ESSER funds for non-routine maintenance without first receiving an OSF permit and full approval. And here is a little table to highlight some of the differences between ESSER 1 and 2. ESSER 1 was authorized through the CARES Act and is available through September 30th, 2022. And ESSER 2 was authorized through the CRRSA Act and is available through September 30th, 2023. Equitable services are required on the part of districts under ESSER 1 and on the part of states under ESSER 2. Under ESSER 1, there are 12 allowable uses of funds, and under ESSER 2, the original 12 categories are still available with the addition of 3 new categories. And finally, ESSER 1 and 2 funds should be tracked completely separately. Now we're going to look forward a little bit to ARPA and ESSER 3. The American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law on March 11th, 2021. This act will provide an additional $121 billion as the ESSER 3 grant. Like ESSER 1 and 2, states will be awarded grants to provide LEAs with emergency funds to address the impact of COVID-19. And ESSER 3, under ESSER 3, South Carolina will receive just over $2 billion in emergency funds. ESSER 3 has some additional requirements for the use of funds compared to ESSER 1 and 2. Districts will be required to set aside a certain percentage of funds devoted to learning loss, and the SCDE will be required to set aside a certain percentage of the state reserve for activities related to learning loss and after-school programs. More information about ESSER 3 will become available in the coming months. And here are some general ESSER reminders. First, there is no established due date for ESSER 2. However, we do encourage districts to act expeditiously and submit a plan as soon as possible, given the emergency nature of these funds. Quarterly reports for ESSER 1 and 2 are due by the 5th day following each fiscal quarter. Districts using ESSER 2 funds for Level 2 or Level 3 alterations will receive a conditional approval pending full approval with an OSF permit. And a GEPA statement is required with ESSER 2 plans, and please send completed plans to the scesser@ed.sc.gov email account. And here are some additional ESSER resources for you. Linked is the SCDE ESSER 1 and 2 web pages, the ESSER 2 FAQ, and the USED ESSER webpage. Thank you so much for attending this presentation on ESSER, and please feel free to leave your questions in the chat or email the ESSER account, and we will work to get them answered as quickly as possible. And now I will go ahead and turn it over to Audrey Shiflett from the Grants Program Office to talk about understanding your GAN. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Give me just a moment as I pull up my presentation. Okay, Jewel, can you tell me? You see it all?
We see what you want us to see. We're ready.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to introduce you to some new elements that will be in your new subgrant award, which we call the GAN, or the Grant Award Notification. And a lot of these are resulting from the OMB's updates to the Uniform Grant Guidance that went into effect last November. So we're going to look at the origins of what has changed, which is basically new and updated regulations. And I'm going to show you parts of the new GAN format dictated by these regulations, and introduce you to some new applicable regulation items that you'll see in your grant award notification. Before concluding, I'm going to remind you of some new information from state procurement, and also some other reminders kind of to reinforce some things you've already been hearing in this academy this week. And I ask that you please hold questions until the end, but feel free to go ahead and enter those questions into the chat box during this presentation. So my disclaimer is to assure you that my presentation is not comprehensive, and it is not a substitution for you reading any of your subgrant awards in their entirety, along with any applicable assurances and terms and conditions that may apply to your subawards. This includes applicable federal regulations and any program-specific assurances and requirements. As I said, this isn't a comprehensive presentation because I could spend the entirety of this academy talking with you about things you should probably know and be aware of from the federal laws and regulations about your specific subgrant programs. This is to just give you an overview of information that you can use to be prepared to manage your federal programs effectively. So first, we're going to step back a little bit to have you remember last year. You may have noticed that your subgrant awards continued operating in some form, in some way, perhaps under waivers to allow you some flexibility, but things did move along in the midst of some changes in regulations. So what we're attempting to do right now at the point we are in time is to hurdle this gap between the old uniform grant guidance that we had all grown used to since 2014 and the new federal regulations that went into effect both on August 12th, 2020, when they were rolled out, and new changes to the uniform grant guidance that went into effect as of November 12th, 2020. And I'll give you some more information on those. So as Andrew Ball with Bruce Stein and Manasevit mentioned Monday morning, the Federal Office of Management and Budget has updated the uniform grant guidance in 2 CFR Part 200. And this is part of the U.S. Department of Education's EDGAR, their Education Department General Administrative Regulations. But 2 CFR Part 200 is cross-cutting regulations. So it is in effect for pretty much all of your federal grant or subgrant funds that you receive. 2 regulations went into effect immediately in August 2020. They implemented a restriction on specific uses of federal funds for telecommunication and surveillance equipment. More on that in just a minute. And they also changed the conditions for terminations of awards. And the federal government also set a rolling implementation of the new regulations, meaning they go into effect specific to the funding program, whether you received a new grant on or after November 12th, 2020, or if you received a modification or an amendment to a current award agreement that you have. So you have to work together with your finance office and your program offices. Y'all really need to talk We in our agency are working together to try to track these because you can't make a blanket implementation of these new regulations. It's specific to the different programs. So before going any further, let's look at this specific prohibition on certain telecommunications and video surveillance equipment. This regulation is really important, and it went into effect immediately when they announced the updated regulations in August. It means you cannot use federal funds for telecommunications or video surveillance equipment or services from these specific listed companies: Huawei, Hytera, Hangzhou, Dahua. Be sure and read this regulation in section 216 of the Uniform Grant Guidance. It also specifies any subsidiary of these companies or any affiliates of these companies. So this is just a reminder to know how you're spending your federal funds. You must ensure that you are compliant with this regulation. So check your contracts to make any adjustments if you are using federal funds to provide to get services or equipment from these companies or affiliates or subsidiaries of these companies. Now, how do you know if they're affiliates or subsidiaries? You have to do your due diligence, and we're having to do this too. One suggestion that we've heard is to create an affidavit that you can use with your contractors or vendors so that they can affirm to you that they are not affiliated with these companies that are banned from receiving federal funds. Be sure and follow up with this because auditors will check this. This will be one of those low-hanging fruit things that comes about in the audits for 2020 as this went into effect. Other revisions to the Uniform Grant Guidance and to CFR Part 200, there are 426 changes. As I mentioned, I could talk to you for the entirety of this academy. Not going to do that. I'm just going to hit some highlights that pertain to your grant award notification and some things that you can be looking out for. One of the changes as they inserted 216 into the set of regulations, some of the numbering for different sections changed. Some of the language used in some of the subparts have changed. So you're going to want to get out to CFR Part 200 and reread. You want to go to it online at ecfr.gov for the most recent updates and see things that have changed. One thing that has changed is all of the definitions are in one subpart now, subpart 1. There are no individual sections for individual definitions. This means if you have incorporated a reference to a definition from the Uniform Grant Guidance in your policies and procedures, you will want to update that section number change because that'll be something that auditors are looking for when they come in and ask to see your written policies and procedures. Do your documents reflect the updates to the Uniform Grant Guidance or not? Our regulation that we have to follow, the requirement for pass-through entities, is one of these sections that's had a number change. It has changed from 331 to 332 now. So we have to update our internal guidance to our program offices because this regulation tells us a lot of important things like what we need to put into your GAN, your subgrant award notification. So we're going to look at the ESSER 2 subaward as an example. We've created these. Some of you may not have received yours yet. You will eventually once you have an approved spending plan. But as you see from the top of this award, it looks a lot like your current subgrant awards, but there are differences, and we're going to look at some of those. So one of the differences is that there are now 14 items that we must include in helping identify to you that you are receiving a federal award. So there are also new language changes and numbering changes. So we'll look at a numbering change that indicates a change coming soon. So one of the numbering and item changes is the DUNS number, the Dun & Bradstreet's Universal System Number is going to be going away, and the federal government is going to be issuing a unique entity identifier. So under the new regulations, box 4 of the sub-grant award will reference the subgrantee's unique identifier and with the unique entity identifier number instead of referencing a DUNS number. Now, how do you get the unique identifier? You got to keep your SAM registration current. The federal government plans to roll out these UEs, the unique entity identifier, in April for SAM registrations that are current in the System of Award Management, the SAM.gov system. If your district is not current, and from our research, I think everybody's current right now, but you finance folks want to be sure that you are, then your unique entity identifier will be automatically assigned by the federal government. You don't have to do anything, and I believe you will get notification through the System of Award Management that you have a new UEI. For entities that are not current with their SAM registration, it will be a re-upping process that will probably take longer than the normal re-upping process in SAM for re-upping registration, because the DUNS number will no longer be the number that applies. So the SAM system will have to assign a new unique entity identifier. But just be aware that unique entity identifier will be replacing the DUNS, and that's coming out soon. And we just suggest to everyone, be sure that you have an internal control established, which is a documented process and procedure, so that your SAM registration gets renewed annually before it expires. There is a brand new item under the new regulations, which is a subaward budget period start and end date. And there's a new definition in section 1 of the Uniform Grant Guidance that the budget period is the time interval from the start date of a funded portion of an award to the end date of that funded portion. And that's the time period that you're authorized to spend funds that you've been awarded. And if you have had any carry forwards or a modification that may have changed your program plan or the budget plan, anything that's allowable under section 308 of the Uniform Grant Guidance, which is revision to budget and program plans, that's also encompassed in this new budget period definition. So in addition to the project period of performance that you're familiar with, you will also see a budget period of performance, which will give you the start date and the end date of the specific budget period. In the sample on the slide, the budget period is the same as the period of performance, but depending on the specific subgrant, this may not be the case always. So that's another item in the subaward GAN that you will need to be looking for, and finance folks, be aware that there will be a new budget period listed for that specific award. If you have a subgrant that's for a multi-year award like McKinney-Vento or the 21st Century Community Learning Center subgrants, you may have different periods of performance listed and a different budget period listed. But however it's set up for the specific subaward you're looking at, the budget period indicates the period of time during which you can spend the funds. So there are some items that are the same that we have to present to you in the grant award. They have different sub numbers for us from the regulation. And we're now going to be putting all three of those into section 2 of the GAN so that you will see an award amount. You will also see a listing of the total amount of funds obligated to the sub-grantee. That was the same as the previous grant format. But now there'll be another amount of the total amount of funds committed to the sub-grantee. So the award amount is the primary number specific to the sub-grant action that is being taken. That is the amount of funds being committed through the action of the sub-grant. There are other items that we have to continue to provide. The federal award project description as required for FFATA, and our information that we include at the top, and we also include the full name of the federal awarding agency. But there are some other changes going on with that program title from the federal government. The CFDA, the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance, has gone away. So everybody say bye-bye to that. They are now calling the federal assistance programs just assistance listings. For now, they're the same numbers as they were in the CFDA, being used for the assistance listings. So for example, the U.S. Department of Education programs start with 84, and then there's a dot, and numbers that follow like 010A, which is for Title I. The U.S. Department of Education listings are still using 84. The Department of Agriculture is still using 10 for their preview, and Department of Health and Services is still using 93 for their numbers. So the numbers that are being used are still the same numbers as they were for the CFDA listings. They're just referred to as assistance listings now. So you will see that change in your GAN in box, it's now box 7 for the federal award information. Instead of saying CFDA number, it says assistance listings. But it still gives the same number, and it still gives the same federal title that's given to the program. And we provide this information for FFATA in a separate section 10 of the GAN. So some other things we have to identify for you that have new numbers for us, but the same information for you. Whether the award is an R&D, which means research and development. We don't have subgrants at this time that involve research and developments, at least not ones to school districts. And then we have to include your indirect cost rate for what you've been approved for to use for federal subgrants through our Office of Auditing Services, whether or not the subgrant program allows you to claim indirect costs. We're still required to list your indirect cost rate on your subgrant program, GAN. So other items that are required that we have to provide to you are the scope of work and any requirements that we as a state have to impose on you so that you can carry out your subgrant project compliant with federal laws, statutes, regulations, and anything that we have to impose so that we can carry out our grant programs using your subgrant work too, to make sure that we meet our federal deadlines as well. We also have to give you all of the applicable regulations that apply to your subgrant. These we have to, as the pass-through entity, pass through to you as the subgrantee. You will see some new language and some, especially for the U.S. Department of Education's modification that they made to 2 CFR Part 175, the award term for trafficking in persons. You'll notice in your subgrant award under the applicable regulations that there will be additional language. We realized in looking at the awards that we were receiving from the U.S. Department of Education that we needed to provide more language to you so that you will understand in your subgrant how the U.S. Department of Education modified and accepted that regulation. Also, there is a new requirement in the Uniform Grant Guidance for domestic preference for procurements. This is a new regulation that was included in the change announced in August 2020 that became effective for new or modified awards in November 2020. And this is a domestic preference for procurements. I'm not going to read it to you here, but this is some of the language that you will see in your new GAN. And more about this. So this regulation breaks down for you what is meant by produced in the United States and what is meant by manufactured products. Now, this is a requirement for a domestic preference. So one more thing about it, they tell us in the reg, as you'll read it when you go there, that we must include it in all subawards. So that's why you will see this language in the GANs now, and that we must include it in all contracts and purchase orders. That has to be passed through to you as a subgrantee as well. So you are going to want to incorporate this into your procurement processes, that it is a domestic preference for goods. So, and it is to the extent practicable that you will have a domestic preference for goods. So you can determine in your procurement processes how you plan to include this language in your contracts and purchase orders, and how you plan through your procurement processes to document that to the extent practicable, you have had a domestic preference for goods. It's not mandating that you have to use goods developed in the United States, but that you have a preference for that to the extent practicable, as the regulation says. This is something new that we are getting our arms around too with procurement. So I want to remind you all, because we're, on the cusp of seeing a lot of money come in as subgrants to your district, that despite what Matthew Lesko and other hucksters would have you believe, there is no free money from grants. You all know that all grants and subgrants have strings attached. And some of those strings are the laws that come into play, and especially the authorizing legislation for some of these grant programs. And in the last year, we've all been seeing lots of legislation on top of legislation authorizing more streams of funds that are going to be coming into schools as subgrants. So you have to organize, and I have a slide about that in a little bit, but just keep these different streams in mind and the different technicalities of the legislation. Also, the federal regulations. This is kind of a hierarchy here from what is in play, the laws at the top, then you get to statutes and regulations that have the same effect as law. Then coming on down, you might have non-regulatory guidance from the federal agency that's trying to explain in real language how you can implement and how you can put what's in the law and the regulations into effect in a practical way. And then less binding are any letters and press releases that you may receive through us from the federal government or from us as additional guidance of how to manage your program. Other strings that are also in play are state laws and funding provisos, like the proviso that sets limits on per diem and travel. Because we are a pass-through entity, that means the federal funds flow through us, and in flowing through us, the applicable state laws and procurement regulations get applied on top of those. And then if you have policies and procedures like inventory control, or ways that your office specifically does things or your finance office does things, those get overlaid on how your district manages your subgrant funds. So lots of strings there to keep in mind. So I brought that up because I wanted to address this question that someone had posed about why are the COVID relief fund quarterly funds due, reports on those about quarterly spending are due the 5th day after the quarter ends, whereas other claims aren't due for other subgrants until 45 days following. Well, that's an issue of what strings those COVID relief funds are set under. And it goes back to the CARES Act, which is the legislation for under which that first SC CARES ESSER 1 funds came out under. The CARES Act set the law that states must report not later than 10 days after the end of each calendar quarter. So in order for our agency to meet that deadline, we are allowed under the Uniform Grant Guidance, that regulation I was showing you of the pass-through entity responsibilities, that we can set a reporting requirement so that we can meet our responsibility to the federal awarding agency, which is the U.S. Department of Education, which they didn't set the reporting time frame. The Congress set the reporting time frame for 10 days after the end of each calendar quarter. So that's why you as a subgrantee have to report to us no later than the 5th day after the end of the quarter. And you'll see that language in your subgrant award for those funds. We had to set that deadline that is different from other subgrants so that we can meet our legislated deadline for reporting on the use of those funds. So a reminder, some subgrants report at the end of the fiscal year, for example, that ends June 30th, they must report by August 15th of that year. And understand that your subgrant award is specific to that pot of funds for which you're receiving that award. So the reporting may be different, and different subgrants have different reporting times. So program offices work with your finance offices, be sure that everyone's on the same page of when the reports are due for that specific subgrant and how they may be different for different subgrants. Again, know your subgrants, know that it may be under different federal legislation. There may be characteristics that are similar across your subgrants, but be sure and track the changes, because missing a reporting deadline can have consequences beyond just, oops, let me correct that. It can go into the annual assessment that all of our program offices do of their subgrantees, as we're required to by federal regulation. So just as Tiffany Kessler reminded you Monday morning, pay attention to the fiscal years of your federal awards so that you can better track them. Not all of your federal subgrant awards have waivers. Not all waivers are unilateral across programs. So you're going to want to take the time to organize the information about your subgrants so that going forward you can stay organized and track those. At this point, I want to show you how the state of South Carolina has been moving forward with some changes during 2020. State procurement announced last Friday a proposed 2020 model school district procurement code. It incorporates significant changes dating back to May 2019 in the state's consolidated procurement code and regulations. This is now open for public review and comment. When it is approved, it will supersede the current 2011 version of the Model School District Procurement Code. So we've been waiting a while for this to be released. Some of the considerations that they call into for you to think about is the fact that, you know, school districts are different. They do want the school district code to be able to accommodate differences, including that your purchasing staff or your procurement staff may be different from the next school district over. Your district may have differences in its governing or its executive hierarchy. But then they do want to point out that ultimately the litmus test is that the section of the reg dictates the school procurement code must be substantially similar to the state's consolidated procurement code and regulations. So you are encouraged to please provide your review the model procurement code and the attachments that they're providing. It's on the state's procurement website. In the left bar, they have a hyperlink directly to the new 2020 proposed model code. Be sure you review the code and the attachments, and you have the opportunity to submit comments by April 2nd to Crawford Milling. His email address is here, and it's also provided with the information on the procurement office's website. We recommend that you adopt the model code for a big reason. It aligns with the federal regulations. It will allow your district to benefit from the new federal thresholds that have been incorporated into the state's procurement code now. And because all school districts are going to be subject to the federal audit requirement just by virtue of the amount of funds that are currently flowing into your district, may be in process or pending from flowing into your district, and the new funds that are going to be on the horizon coming into your district. Your district will not be allowed to apply the federal thresholds that Andrew Ball mentioned Monday, that the micro purchase thresholds, the small purchase thresholds. You won't be able to use it unless you have a model, your school district's procurement code or school district's procurement policy has been approved by the Division of Procurement Services at the State Fiscal Accountability Authority. So this is something important for your district to consider adopting. And there are more things for you to consider. I'm going to run through quickly. So because of the changes to the Uniform Grant Guidance to CFR Part 200, language has changed, section numbers have changed. You're going to need to update your policies and procedures to reflect those changes. Some of the policies and procedures that you should have written within your district are affected, like allowability, the list of questions that you're supposed to be asking before you approve expenditure of any federal funds. Policies that you use for managing equipment, your district's travel policy, your procedures also for time and effort, recording, and record retention can all be affected by the changes to the language in the Uniform Grant Guidance and the numbering. Also, we encourage you to be prepared for audit, be prepared for monitoring, understand that it can happen and it will happen considering the flow of federal funds that it's going to be coming through your district. So just as a reminder, time and effort documentation is very important. Under the regulations, you have to account for 100% of the employee's time, regardless of whether federal funds cover the full 100%. If you have an employee who is only 10% supported by a federal subgrant, you must still account for the other 90% of their time in the time and effort documentation of, what's taking up that part of their time in order to be compliant with the federal regulation. With inventory control, regardless of what your inventory control policy may say at your district, if you know that those iPads that you plan to purchase with federal subgrant funds are at risk of walking away from the district at any time, you need to have an inventory control process for those, a way of tracking where they are, because that's an important use of federal funds. You need to demonstrate that your district has control over where those are. It can be a simple sign out, sign in process, but something that you can show to an auditor and you can demonstrate it's effective when they come in and ask, because they will ask. And just a reminder that the regulations require written policies and procedures so that there's evidence that your school district has effective internal control. At this time, I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'm sure that there are questions in the chat box. I just am unable to see it at this time, so I'm going to stop presenting and I'll just talk. And let me bear with me just a moment while I get back to being able to see the chat box.
Audrey,
Yes.
One of the questions asks, where can we access the model?
Yes, the model is at, and let me see if I can pull up. I want to try to put that address in the chat box because it was on the slide.
It looks like Emma's already helped you out.
Wonderful. Yes, I'm still having a challenge seeing the chat box, so I'm getting over to it hopefully now.
Okay. Another question is, do you have a good time and effort spreadsheet or worksheet?
I do not, but I believe our agency provides one. Jewel, I'm wondering, does the Office of Federal and State Accountability share some guidance with?
We do not have a specific time and effort model that we have said that districts must follow, but I'm sure that we can pull some examples from some various audits that our monitoring team has been a part of, and they can look to give you some samples.
That sounds good. Jewel, if you don't mind, if there are other
Yes,
questions in the chat box, I'm still having a difficult time seeing chat. I can see folks,
and
but
one
I'm
of the
not seeing the
other
chat.
Okay, one of the other questions, and I've answered it in the chat box, was who in the district receives the GANs. And I will say that our office sends GANs directly to the district superintendent. If you're having trouble getting those GANs from the superintendent, I suggest that you work closely with his office, with his executive administrative assistant to make sure that you're setting up some sort of procedure to ensure that your office is getting a copy of that GAN as well once it's signed. It's always good to have that GAN on file in your office so that you are aware of everything that's spelled out in the GAN. And we have people putting their PARS examples and time and effort examples in the chat box for participants.
Which is great sharing. Thank y'all for doing that, because as school districts, it helps for you to be able to see what other school districts use. I know we get asked a lot if we can give samples of things. The State Department of Education is a state agency. We're not set up like a school district. So like examples of our policies and procedures really don't work well because we're not a school district. We all are set up a bit differently. So thank you so much for sharing things that have been useful among, you know, for you, for other school districts to see. That's wonderful.
Okay, we have a few more questions popping up. Let's see. You may have explained this, and if you did, I'm sorry I missed it, but what is the difference between obligated to the subgrantee and committed to the subgrantee?
Some of those are just language things, and the regulations say total amount of federal funds obligated to the subrecipient by the pass-through entity, including the current financial obligation. And then a separate item we have to show you is the total amount of federal award committed to the subrecipient by the pass-through entity. We are going to be putting those in very carefully because we are going to have our Office of Auditing Services verify before we put those in. A lot of times we see obligated as meaning like for a current budget period. Let's say we give you $1 million, then we have obligated those funds to you in that budget period. Committed may mean for a project that spans multiple budget periods, meaning I used earlier like McKinney-Vento. McKinney-Vento can have a 3-year project performance period. It may have 3 separate budget periods. My understanding by committed to the subrecipient we may be obligated to show you the total funds that are committed over the performance period of 3 years, but that does not mean we are obligating those funds to you for a specific period, because there could be a problem with your subgrant. There could be something, say you don't meet a target, or something just unforeseen happens. There could be all kinds of reasons for why that subaward does not make it to its final budget period, like the 3rd year. So the total amount of funds over the 3 years that may have been committed may not be the same that ultimately gets obligated. So I think that's why it's different uses of language, and we're still figuring out what the federal government's intention is, but I think it's all toward helping us to understand how much is being over the term full performance period of a subgrant and of our larger grant, how much money is going to be in play or is projected to be in play. I know that was a long-winded answer. And I apologize for that, but we're still learning the new terms and the regs. Hope that helped.
Okay, Audrey, there's a request for you to go back to slide 32 and just show the more strings slide, please. Well,
okay, I'm not sure if it was
maybe
slide.
It's not 32. Okay.
Let me see if I can bring it up for you. Are you seeing it now?
I do see the strings slide. Hopefully, Devonna, this is the slide that you were asking for. If not, let us know in the chat, and we'll try to find the slide that you want to see.
And just understand that that hierarchy for federal goes from laws, and especially the authorizing legislation that sets the programmatic statute for the grant program. So all federal grants originate in law, and because law is written largely by legislators and not by lawyers, it may result in the need for federal regulations. Used to be circulars, but now everything's been codified into regulations. And regulations are really where the lawyers try to tease out and set more requirements and explanation of how someone can adhere to the law by following regulations. Because sometimes that doesn't work fully, federal agencies may have to issue non-regulatory guidance to help further.
Thank you, Audrey. Let's see. She says she wants you to click on slide. Let's try 31. I think that one says more strings, although she says it's slide 32, but I don't know what it is. And then we can just look at that one, and then you can click to 32 as well. And oh, she said okay. This one's it. This one is the slide she was looking for.
And I will do a handout, and I'll do a 2-slide each page handout, and I will send that to the office so they'll get it into the handouts today.
All right, well, thank you for that. Let's see, our next question for you, Audrey, says, is the subject line for GANs to the superintendent always the same? I have difficulty tracking down GANs and often told that with over 500 emails a day being received, that they get lost in the madness. So that's not really a question for you, Andre. It's more of a, well, they've got to figure out, or we have to figure out something that will, I guess, grab the superintendent's attention to let them know that they have a GAN waiting. The next question is, does a PARS have to be done for teachers who may be tutoring after school, or is it for the 1.0 FTE people? And we treat those who are tutoring, if they're already in a Title I school working, and then they're tutoring in the afternoon, we treat that as a single cost objective. Let's see, looking to see what else we have. Yes, these slides will be made available later for everyone, and this session is being recorded, so you will have the benefit of going back and listening to the presentations that have occurred all the days of our ESSA Academy. So we'll make sure that you get those in the coming days as soon as they're queued up and ready for our office to have them. Okay, the PARS explanation. Leemma, I'm trying to figure out what exactly do you want to know. If it's someone who is currently working in a school and then they work in the after-school program, we're not requiring, excuse me, I can say that the monitoring team does not require that you complete a PARS on just for after school if they are currently working in that school, because it's treated as a single cost objective for those teachers. And Leemma, you certainly can call me after our academy if you have more questions, and we can talk through everything. Okay, let's see, Sandra, you want to know about some of the pre-questions to some of your thoughts. If those were specific to different activities that you wanted to do for your district, I will be reaching out to you, or Jennifer Rose will be reaching out to you about those. I think you had some specific allowability questions. Okay, we have just about 12 minutes or so before we do our presentation for our SCATA scholarship participants. We have invited the participants and parents just to be a part of the slideshow so they can see those students being recognized. We appreciate your patience as you wait along with us for that presentation. As you know, this time of year, if we were meeting for our face-to-face meeting, we would have had a scholarship luncheon where all of those wonderful students would have been recognized for their hard work throughout their education from K-12 and earning those excellent grades and earning the scholarships, but we're not able to do that. So we're going to do it a little differently. As you can tell, we're doing everything virtually. So if you would stick around for that recognition, we're going to just take a few minutes for a break, and we're going to recognize those scholarship winners at 10:30. But before I jump off this call for a few minutes with you, I just really want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who participated in the ESSA Academy. The presenters, thank you so much for your hard work. Thank you so much for preparing wonderful presentations for the presenters. I thank you so very much. I thank all of the people who have been working behind the scenes, making sure that we were able to have our academy virtually this time. This was a new endeavor, and I thank all of you for what you've done. And also, I can't go without saying thank you to the participants for sticking with us these 2.5 days with the information that we were trying to share with you all. Thank you so very much. So if you don't mind, we will jump back on at 10:30 to recognize our participants. Thank you.
Good morning, ESSA Academy participants. I hope that everyone could hear me. I'm in the process of sharing my screen, and this is for the presentation for our scatter recipients. So if folks can hear me, if you can give me a little thumbs up or yes or something like that, I'd appreciate it.
Vanessa, we can hear you loud and clear. We just need you to go ahead and put your presentation in the present mode, and we're ready.
All right, I love it. It gives me great pleasure to share with you this morning our information for our scatter recipients. My name is Dr. Vanessa Nelson Reed, and I am the president-elect for the South Carolina Association of Title I Administrators. As you know, one of our missions for the South Carolina Association of Title I Administrators is provide additional support for our schools and our students and our staff for professional development as well as scholarships. And each year we award regional scholarships for our Title I, our association. It is part of our mission to do so, and I present to you the 2021 Regional Scholarship recipients. For Region 1, our first place winner is Shayna Gadsden. Shayna is from Cross High School in Cross, South Carolina, in the Berkeley County School District. The second place winner is Markiem Smith. Markiem is a senior at Estill High School, Estill, South Carolina, and represents the Hampton County 2 School District. Our third place winner, Grace Wisemantle. Grace is from Hilton Head Island High School, Hilton Head, South Carolina, part of the Beaufort County School District. Our Region 2 winners, first place, Yesenia Castellanos from Peelian High School, Peelian, South Carolina, in Lexington County School District 1. For our Region 2 second place winner, Markina V. Griffiths, Fox Creek High School, North Augusta, South Carolina, and Markina represents the South Carolina Public Charter School District. Our third place winner in Region 2 is Luke Furtick. Luke is a senior at Swansea High School from Swansea, South Carolina, in Lexington County School District 4. For Region 3, Abu M. Tapper is the first place winner from D.W. Daniel High School in Central South Carolina, and that is part of the Pickens County School District. For Region 3, our second place winner, Zoe Willis. Zoe is a senior at Pendleton High School in Anderson, South Carolina, Anderson School District 4. Our third place winner, Tyler Steele. Tyler is a senior at 96 High School in 96, South Carolina, part of the Greenwood County School District 52. For Region 4, our first place winner is Hannah Brock. Hannah is a senior at Whitmore Community School in Whitmire, South Carolina, and that is part of the Newberry County School District. Our second place winner, Keegan N. Johnson. Keegan is a senior at Spartanburg High School, Spartanburg, South Carolina, part of the Spartanburg School District 7. Our third place winner, Promise F. Henry from Broome High School, Spartanburg, South Carolina, Spartanburg School District 3. Our Region 5 winners. Our first place winner for Region 5 is Troy Monique Moore II. Troy is a senior at Chester Senior High School in Chester, South Carolina, part of the Chester County School District. Mr. Moore is also the National Association of Education Federal Administrators, or NAFEPA, Iva McCants Scholarship. As such, he is one of our national winners representing the great state of South Carolina for our national organization. Congratulations to Mr. Troy Monique Moore II. In Region 5, our second place winner is Carol S. Linton. Carol is a senior from Sherrall High School in Sherrall, South Carolina, representing Chesterfield County School District. Our third place winner from Region 5 is Jalen Jackson. And Jalen is a senior at Fairfield Central High School in Winnsboro, South Carolina, representing Fairfield County School District. For Region 6, our first place winner is Abby Richburg from Manning High School, Manning, South Carolina, which is in Clarendon County School District 2. Our second place winner from Region 6 is Ryan Bennett. Ryan is a senior at Wilson High School in Florence, South Carolina, and she represents Florence County School District 1. Our third place winner for Region 6 is Aaliyah Jones. Aaliyah is a senior at Georgetown High School in Georgetown, South Carolina, and represents the Georgetown County School District. Congratulations to all of our scholarship winners. We have 18 representing our 6 regional districts. We want to thank the regional representatives and administrators who got together to review the applications and choose our scholarship winners on today. And we encourage you all in all your future endeavors. For those of you who could join us this morning, we're glad to have you. Once again, on behalf of SCATA, thank you and congratulations.
Congratulations once again to all of the SCATA scholarship recipients. We are so very proud of you and all of the work that you have put into your education. We wish you well with your future endeavors. I'd like to remind you that we have 2 breakout sessions that are scheduled for 11:30. We have foster care and bridging the gap through continuous improvement. Please join us again at 11:30 for those breakout sessions. Following the breakout sessions at 12:30, we will have the SCATA business meeting. You have a little bit of a break to catch up on any work that's waiting for you. So we'll see you back at 11:30. Thank you.